If you don't trust each other enough for this, she smiled, then perhaps tomorrow isn't such a good idea. That's what his mother said. Her voice was calm, velvet over glass. Her hand rested delicately on a champagne flute while her other hand slid 30 embossed pages across the linen tablecloth, landing just inches from my untouched dessert. I blinked down at the prenup. My name was printed on the front. I wasn't sure which felt colder, the room or the silence that followed. This was supposed to be the rehearsal dinner, not a negotiation, not a trap. And certainly not the moment I realized I wasn't a bride. I was a variable to manage. My name is Jenna Vaughn. I work in PR corporate side, mostly for tech firms that find themselves in hot water after tweeting one thing too many. I know what control looks like. I know how power masks itself in silk and smiles. But I didn't see it coming here. Not with Alex. Not with the man I loved. We met at a conference in Boston, me covering media relations, him giving a keynote on sustainable real estate. I didn't know who he was at first. He looked too normal to be rich. Wool coat, soft eyes, no arrogance. I only learned his full name the next morning when someone whispered, "That's Calder money." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because, at the time, I didn't care. He held doors. He texted good morning. He asked about my mother. He made me feel safe in a way I didn't know I'd been craving. And when he proposed, it wasn't extravagant. No fireworks, no flash mob. Just us. A quiet Tuesday evening. And a small sapphire ring he'd designed himself because he remembered me saying diamonds felt too loud. I said yes, before he even finished asking. His family was different. They weren't cruel. They were careful, polished. His mother, Eleanor, once handed me a leather-bound etiquette guide for Christmas and said, "It helped me immensely when I married up too." She called me ambitious the same way someone else might say cheap. I knew I wasn't their ideal. Not from the right circles, not raised at the right zip code. But I believed love was enough. I believed Alex was enough. That night at the rehearsal dinner, everything changed. I wore cream satin. Eleanor wore diamonds. The food was exquisite. The venue was candlelit. The laughter was warm. And then, the laughter faded. Because Eleanor pulled out a manila folder and said with a smile that didn't quite touch her eyes, "Just a small formality before dessert." Alex didn't say a word. He didn't look at me. Not even when I reached for his hand under the table. It wasn't there. The prenup wasn't discussed in advance. No mention during engagement. No, "We should go over this together." No heads up from Alex's lawyer. Just 30 pages, printed on thick paper, passed across bone china and silver flatware like a place card at a party I'd forgotten I never truly belonged to. "There's nothing unusual in there," Eleanor chirped. "All Calder spouses sign one. It's practically tradition." I tried to skim the pages. Legalese, clauses, trusts, asset protection, inheritance shields. It blurred. I looked around the table. Laughter had returned, as if no one noticed the silent negotiation happening inches from my plate. Alex finally leaned in. "It's just protocol," he said, too quickly. "Let's not make this a thing." Let's not make this a thing. I swallowed the words I wanted to scream. Instead, I picked up the pen they'd thoughtfully placed on top of the folder. And I signed. Because I didn't want to be dramatic. Because I didn't want to embarrass him. Because I thought walking away would be the bigger betrayal. Back in the hotel room that night. Alone, of course. Tradition. I stared at my own signature for what felt like hours. It looked like someone else had written it. A girl who wanted to belong more than she wanted to be respected. I started folding the document, telling myself it was done, But on page 17, something stopped me. A name, Camille Arden, buried in a footnote, a subsection tied to a discretionary trust. Something about survivorship and future heirs. It made no sense. But the name hit me like cold water, because I knew it. Alex had mentioned her once, early on, in a rare, quiet moment. His ex from college. Didn't end well, he'd said. Long story. We never talked about her again. Until now. Until her name appeared in our prenup, in the same document that Eleanor called standard. And that was the moment I stopped feeling like a bride, and started wondering what, or who, this wedding was really protecting. The next morning, my mother knocked on the hotel suite door at 7:03 a.m., holding a pastry bag and smiling like we were still in a fairy tale. I tucked the prenup deeper into my overnight bag before opening the door. She didn't see the unrest in my face, or the nausea curling under my ribs. She just kissed my cheek and said, "One more day until you're a Calder, sweetheart." Number not, if something inside me was right. The name Camille Arden echoed in my head like a warning bell I couldn't unhear. Why was she listed in a legal document about my marriage? Alex had mentioned her once, casually, a long ago ex. Now she was printed, legally binding in the same sentence as our future inheritance clause. I couldn't ask Eleanor, and I couldn't trust Alex. So I went to the one Calder who had ever looked at me like I was human, Hannah, his younger sister. I found her seated by the window of the bridal lounge, thumbing through her phone during her hair trial, bored, detached, sipping iced coffee like it was a shield. "Hey," I said, gently pulling her aside. "Can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest." She gave a smirk. "This about the prenup?" My blood froze. "You knew?" She shrugged. "She did the same thing to Camille." The breath caught in my chest. "What? You didn't know?" Her voice dropped. "Camille was practically engaged to Alex. 3 years. Everyone assumed it was a done deal." I swallowed. "She told me it was just a college girlfriend." Hannah blinked, then gave a sharp, knowing smile. "Yeah, that's a Calder move. Rewriting history until it fits the room." "What happened to her?" "She disappeared." Then added, "I mean, not like vanished. She just left, right before things got serious. My mom always said she was too independent. Wouldn't toe the line." I tilted my head. "What line?" Hannah dropped her voice. "Camille wanted to work with the Calder Foundation. She had ideas. She wanted to make things more transparent, reallocate funds, start social equity grants." I raised my eyebrows. "She cared," Hannah said, almost like an apology. "Which was the problem? My parents. They don't like women who want things." That afternoon, while the others were off getting massages, I faked a headache and shut myself in the bridal suite. I opened my laptop and typed Camille Arden Calder. Nothing. No photos, no articles, no Instagram remnants, no press announcements, no wedding page, no college alumni notes. It was like she had been wiped clean, sanitized. I tried different combinations. Camille Arden plus Boston, Camille Arden obituary. The screen flickered as the page loaded. My heart pounded. A cold sweat began at the back of my neck. Why wasn't there anything? Why does someone so close to this family have no digital trace? It didn't feel like absence. It felt like a cover-up. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And then, just as I was about to close the tab, one result appeared. Local newspaper archive. 2017. No photo. Just 2 lines. Camille A., age 25, passed unexpectedly. Survived by her mother and brother. Private services held. I stared at the screen. A cold, hard lump settled in my chest. 2017. The same year I met Alex. The same month, in fact. A wave of nausea hit me. My mouth went dry. That night, I walked through the Calder estate like it wasn't real. Everything glowed. The glass chandeliers, the floral centerpieces, the $1,000 linens draped over 20-foot banquet tables. I moved like a guest at someone else's wedding. At dinner, Alex reached for my hand. His was warm. Mine was ice. I confronted him after midnight. In his childhood bedroom, still perfectly preserved like a museum exhibit, medals and old varsity photos lining the walls, the same lamp from the year he won a science fair trophy glowing next to the bed. He was slipping off his cufflinks. I stood near the window. "Alex," I said, my voice low, "why was Camille's name in the prenup?" He froze, just for a beat, but it was enough. He turned around slowly, his lips parted. No words came. "You read that far?" he asked finally. I didn't answer. He sat down on the edge of the bed, back hunched, clasping his hands between his knees. "She's gone, Jenna." "I know." His throat bobbed. "I didn't tell you because it's complicated, because I didn't want it to change how you saw me." He picked at a thread in his shirt cuff. His eyes refused to meet mine. "You almost married her," I said. He nodded once. "She died." "Why was her name in our prenup?" He didn't answer. "Alex." Still nothing. "Was she part of some arrangement? Did she sign something?" "She was supposed to," he whispered. "But she wanted things." He said it like a sin. My breath caught. "What things?" He stood, walked to the dresser, turned something over in his hands. A ceramic paperweight, maybe. Then set it down again. His voice dropped to a whisper. Control. Transparency. She wanted to see the family records, to access some of the trust allocations. She asked questions. And? He finally looked at me. There was something behind his eyes I hadn't seen in 3 years. Something brittle. Something cornered. Fear. And I pressed again. She didn't last. Those words stopped me. Didn't last? What does that mean? What happened to her? I left the room without another word. Back in the bridal suite, I sat on the floor in my wedding dress fitting robe, knees to my chest, staring at nothing. Camille wanted things, so she didn't last. And now, her name lived in our contract, buried like a cautionary tale, like a threat dressed in legal ink. My heart thudded. A new thought formed, awful and quiet. Did Camille really leave? Or was she erased? I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. Not a second. I sat by the suite window, wrapped in a robe embroidered with my future initials, JC, watching fog slip like breath over the Calder hedges, curling against the stone columns and wrought iron gates. Somewhere below, staff were already setting champagne in silver troughs, steaming linens, preparing the aisle runner Eleanor insisted must be thick enough to hide imperfections. I wondered how many things in this family were hidden under layers of silk. At 5:12 a.m., I stopped pretending. I slipped on flats and made my way to the east staircase, past the silent paintings, past the long wall of Calder family portraits, frozen smiles, tight collars, names carved in brass. At the end of the corridor was a door not listed on the house tour, the library. The key was exactly where I remembered it. Butler's pantry, third drawer, labeled Library E2. The brass was cold in my hand. The lock turned with a reluctant click. The air inside was thick with the scent of old paper and neglect. No windows had been opened in years, Dust floated lazily through a shaft of light cast by a single desk lamp and an old globe with a bulb inside. The light distorted across rows of ledgers and leather-bound folders, casting long, fractured shadows like broken ribs across the walls. It felt like stepping into a sealed tomb. Somewhere behind me, the door closed with a soft thud. Even the silence felt like it belonged to someone else. I moved slowly through the narrow aisles, scanning each spine. Dates, codes, ledger initials. In the far back corner, behind a curtain of spider-veined binders, stood a gray filing cabinet. Standard corporate. I opened the top drawer. Unlocked. Labeled by year. 2016, 2017, 2018. I pulled 2017. Inside, tax forms, audits, donation statements, and then a name. Bold type. Arden, Camille, Calder Foundation proposal, rejected. My pulse kicked hard against my ribs. I opened the folder. 12 pages. A well-researched, passionate proposal outlining how to restructure the foundation's funding model. She wanted to redirect Calder family grants toward community housing, maternal health programs, underfunded inner-city schools. She'd done the data work. Included projections. At the bottom of the first page, a line stood out in bold. Recommended transparency statement. Public annual reports to increase accountability. Across the entire proposal, in red marker. Slashed diagonally. No. Absolutely not. E. I felt something tighten in my chest, a kind of professional nausea. Because this wasn't just family tension. This smelled like suppression. The second document was worse. A letter. Unsigned. Possibly unsent. To whom it may concern, I am writing regarding several irregularities I've encountered while reviewing disbursement records from the Calder Foundation between 2014 to 2016. I am seeking legal clarity on whether these funds were misused or inaccurately reported to auditors. Legal clarity. My PR brain reacted faster than my heart. This wasn't a jealous ex causing trouble. This was a whistleblower. A woman trying to do the right thing. In a house that didn't reward dissent. And then I saw it. The bottom half of the page. Warped, smudged. Not water, not humidity. Tear stains. Not one, several. They streaked downward in soft, painful trails. Some had blurred her signature. A wave of empathy hit me like a punch to the throat. Not because I pitied her, but because I felt her. Her fight. Her clarity. Her isolation. She'd asked for truth. And a few weeks later, she was gone. The folder was dated May 2017. Her obituary, June 3rd, 2017. I stood, legs trembling. The room suddenly felt too small, too heavy. Like the walls were leaning inward, trying to smother me. I backed toward the door and turned. Eleanor stood there, poised, impeccable. Silk blouse, pearls, hair pinned with surgical precision. Curiosity, she said softly, runs in all the women who don't stay. I tried to speak. Couldn't. She didn't flinch. I thought you might find your way in here eventually. She reached for the key in my hand and took it as naturally as someone reclaiming her own jewelry. Then, with a half-turn and a small smile, she said, Camille was never meant to carry that burden. Her eyes, sharp, unblinking, held no grief, only cold pragmatism. She adjusted her earring, smoothed a wrinkle in her sleeve, and walked away. That night, I told Hannah everything. We sat in her room, our legs curled under throw blankets that smelled like too much lavender and too many years of keeping quiet. I showed her the document, let her read the letter, watched her hand cover her mouth. I knew Mom forced Camille out, she whispered. But I didn't know. I didn't know it was this. I asked softly, "Do you think Alex knows?" She shook her head. "He's their golden boy. They protect him from the rot inside the walls." I didn't reply, but I was beginning to realize he wasn't protected. He was blind. I walked the grounds alone after midnight. No bridesmaids, no cameras, no Eleanor. The altar had already been set. The rows of white chairs were arranged like teeth waiting to bite. And beyond the garden, tucked in the trees, the small chapel. I stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the weak morning light spilling through stained glass. The air was thick with the scent of dried roses, old wood, and forgotten prayers. It should have felt sacred. It felt tired. At the altar, a vow book, 2 matching pens, white ribbon, empty pages, waiting for promises I now knew I couldn't make. I sat in the front pew. The wood creaked under me, and then I stood, walked to the book, opened it, and in steady handwriting wrote just 2 words: "Not today." At 6:44 a.m., I slipped out the side entrance of the Calder estate. No security, no chaos. Just the cold hush of a morning that didn't yet belong to anyone. The air hung heavy with the cloying sweetness of lilies, already arranged in tall glass vases near the marquee. Their perfume clashed with the damp, earthy scent rising from the dew-slicked flagstones beneath my flats. Far off, someone tuned a cello, its low notes swelling and drifting like a melancholic warning. It was supposed to be the soundtrack to a perfect morning. Instead, it scored my quiet retreat. I didn't run. I walked. Not with fear, but with clarity. Because this wasn't an escape. This was a decision. A final one. Inside, the house stirred to life behind closed doors. Distant clinks of porcelain, the faint whir of curling irons, laughter beginning to bubble in dressing rooms I would never enter. I passed the staff kitchen, the ballroom, the atrium where champagne would soon sparkle in flutes. No one would raise for me. And I turned right, into the Calder study. The only room Eleanor hadn't shown me during the estate tour. But I knew it now. And it felt right that this is where it would end. The air inside was dry and overpressed with old perfume. The drapes were still drawn, casting stripes of light across polished walnut. I moved to the desk. Eleanor's desk. Smooth, surgical, every pen aligned, notepads stacked with military precision. And beneath it all, control. I opened the drawer and found her stationery. Thick linen paper monogrammed, her name embossed in gold. The irony wasn't lost on me. I would write my refusal on her own paper, at her own desk. The pen felt heavier than I expected. The first letter. For Alex, writing Alex's name felt like tracing a scar. The words came haltingly, thick with 3 years of misplaced faith. But once they came, they didn't stop. Alex, I once believed love meant loyalty, that if I loved you enough, I could bend, I could blend, I could make myself small enough to fit inside this world you were born into. But love is not loyalty to silence. Love is not a contract written with someone else's fears. I saw Camille's name before I ever saw what she stood for. And now, I can't unsee either. You told me she wanted things. So do I. I want air. I want truth. I want to be part of a future that doesn't bury women who ask too many questions. And I will not walk down an aisle paved by someone else's absence. I'm not angry. I'm just done. Jenna, the second letter. For Eleanor's name, in contrast, flowed easily from the pen. Sharp. Precise. This letter didn't tremble. Eleanor, you win. You get your silence, your clean photos, your uninterrupted legacy. But just know this. Not all women who walk away are weak. Some of us leave to protect something stronger than reputation. We leave because someone before us tried to stay, and it cost her everything. And because some truths, once discovered, will not stay buried forever. Especially not under white roses and ivory runners. Jenna Vaughn. I folded the letters with care, then walked upstairs, past the bouquets, past the untouched gown, into the bridal suite. I placed Alex's letter squarely on the pillow where my head should have rested that night, and then back downstairs. In the study, I lifted Eleanor's brass lion paperweight, her favorite symbol of power, and slid the letter beneath its paws. Let the lion guard the truth she refused to face. At 7:26 a.m., I walked out through the garden gate. The sky was pale and open. My steps were soft but steady. The cello continued to hum in the background, slow, beautiful, completely wrong. At 9:02 a.m., guests began arriving. At 9:16, Eleanor noticed my absence. At 9:34, Hannah stepped into the bridal suite and saw the letter. At 10:10, the musician stopped playing. And by 10:23, the ceremony was called off. I spent the morning at a diner 3 towns over. Still in my white robe, still wearing the initials JC, but I ordered my own coffee. No signature, no script, no one watching, and for the first time in months, I breathed. At noon, my phone buzzed. A single text from Hannah. You did what she couldn't. She'd be proud. Reading it made my breath catch. Not just validation, but a connection. A quiet salute across time to another woman who saw too much and vanished too soon. It took time before I remembered how to be alone without mistaking it for abandonment. Not being lonely, but being alone. There's a difference. It wasn't about never aching at night when the quiet settled too thick, or pretending I never missed the weight of someone sleeping beside me. It was about choosing that silence and realizing it was mine. A room where no one whispered less, no contract waited to bind me, no name needed justifying. A place where I could breathe without permission. I moved back to Boston. My new apartment sat above a corner bookstore and a tiny Vietnamese cafe that made the entire stairwell smell like pho and fresh mint by noon. The old radiators hissed and clanked every morning, like they were exhaling just as deeply as I was. Outside, the city murmured. Car horns, distant trains, footsteps on uneven sidewalks. It wasn't quiet like the Calder estate. That kind of chilling, curated silence that pressed on your lungs. This was a live silence. Flawed. Human. Mine. The first thing I bought was a kitchen table, secondhand. The legs wobbled, but it held my laptop, my tea mug, my elbows when I leaned in at 2 a.m., writing again. I took on freelance PR work, the kind that didn't require me to spin billion-dollar apologies for men in blue suits. I consulted for a women's legal aid nonprofit, helping them navigate a crisis with a major donor who'd pulled funding after a financial scandal. When I sat across from the team, drafting their press statement, shaping clarity from chaos, something clicked. Helping them tell the truth, not bury it, felt more rewarding than any glossy campaign I'd ever polished for a corporate boardroom. On weekends, I drew again. Nothing serious, just lines, light, texture. I sketched the way the late afternoon sun curved across my window, the shape of the barista's smile downstairs, the forgotten plant that somehow kept growing on my fire escape. My fingers, once hesitant from years of neglect, moved with forgotten fluency, not flawless, but free. 2 months after the almost wedding, I received a package. No return address. Inside, a photograph. Faded. Slightly wrinkled. Camille, barefoot at the Calder Lake House dock, hair tied back, laughing, mid-motion, joy caught in blur. On the back, written in Hannah's unmistakable script, she wanted more than this family could give her. I think maybe you do too. H. I pressed the photo to my chest. It didn't hurt. It anchored. A quiet salute across time. One woman who saw the truth, and another who didn't let it go to waste. Forgiveness didn't come in one sweeping epiphany. It arrived in fragments. One night, I stood at the mirror brushing my teeth and thought, I don't hate them. Not because they deserved grace, but because I did. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed the Calders. It was something I owed myself. For the blindness, for the hesitation, for signing that paper out of fear instead of strength. Letting go wasn't about them. It was entirely about me. One fall afternoon, I passed a bookstore I hadn't noticed before. In the window, a journal caught my eye. Navy blue, gold letters across the front. Write the ending you deserve. It didn't feel like advice. It felt like a dare. I walked in, bought it, went home, lit a candle, brewed tea with too much honey, and on the first page, I wrote, I am not anyone's Calder. I am no one's condition. I am the consequence of my own clarity. The pen felt steady in my hand, like it didn't just write, it declared. A spell, a signature, a beginning, epilogue. The letter I never had to send. 3 years later, I found myself back in Massachusetts. Not Boston, not the Calder estate, a coastal town north of both, the kind with narrow bookstores, good soup, and neighbors who wave even when they don't know your name. I had started a small creative studio above a cafe. We helped nonprofits find their voice, not just in crisis, but in purpose. The business card didn't say CEO. It said, Jenna Vaughn, cheers us strategy and story. That was enough. One Saturday morning, I walked to the post office to pick up a package, textured paper I'd ordered for a workshop. The clerk handed me a small envelope, too. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Inside, a note. Jenna, I spoke at a panel last week. The topic was legacy versus truth. I told your story, not with your name, but with your courage. It mattered. I just thought you should know. H. I sat on the bench outside, envelope still in hand. The sea wind carried a whisper of something old and something freed. That night, I opened the Navy Journal again. Page 47. The last page I had written on still read, I am not anyone's Calder. Below it, I added, I am a woman who was once offered silence and chose her own voice instead. And every day since, I've been writing a life that doesn't need permission to be mine. A few weeks later, a man named Noah moved into the apartment next door. We met by accident. A jammed hallway door, a shared cup of coffee, a conversation about whether toast counts as a meal. We agreed it does, if there's enough butter. We didn't fall in love immediately. We fell into kindness, then into time, and then, maybe, something better. I haven't worn white since, but sometimes I do look at the sea and think, this is what freedom tastes like. Not loud, not grand, but salt and quiet and clean air. A name I chose, a truth I kept, a story that's still mine to write.